Hello everyone, this is Obscure Nick here with a new video, and today we will be talking about All That Season 3, the season where all that began to peak. So as you know, let's deep dive and thrive. So, for those who are new here, All That is a Nickelodeon sketch comedy show that aired in the 90s, 2000s, and even 2010s. Ran for 11 seasons. It was created by Brian Robbins and Dan Schneider. It is the first of many Dan Schneider shows to come for the channel. And this was one of the most highly rated shows of the 1990s and 2000s on the channel. This show spun off stars like Kenan Thompson, Kel Mitchell, Lori Beth Denberg, Amanda Bynes, Danny Tamborelli, and so many more. Now, All That Season 3 was where I personally think All That peaked, in my opinion. Some will say season 4 or 5. To me, I remember this being my favorite season when I was younger because it had my favorite cast members all in one. Like, I really like Katrina Johnson, and I think she is an underrated cast member for this show personally and talent-wise. And even though she leaves halfway through this season, her presence is still there and everything. She's still given top tier comedy. And yeah, and also I really love that this is the introduction to Amanda Bynes at the same time. So there's a lot of people that I really liked. I wish Angelique Bates was in this season. But, you know, we have a lot of laughs here. I feel watching this season over again, the show really finds its footing. And a reason why I've taken so long for this, and apologies for taking this long to my audience and everything, because I know a lot of you have been asking, like, where's the All That Season 3 retrospective and stuff? I felt like this was very hard to do because it's Dan Schneider first and foremost. There's a lot of things we know, post-Quiet Set documentary, pre-Quiet Set documentary, and all that and type of stuff. And I just felt like I was only looking for things that were dark about this, whereas like I need to have more nuance. Like, I need to find more balance. And I know my audience wants me to call out Dan Schneider, and we will, of course, where it's appropriate and stuff. And whether this is kids content, should this be in a kids show, should this not be in a kids show, which a lot of my content revolves around, right? So we do that, but I will also talk about what's good about this. I'll try to lean into that more. But I'm gonna question some stuff as well. So take your seat and everything. Another thing I want to mention is I have set up a PayPal. So if you want to donate, you don't have to, but if you want to, and to help support this channel and everything and to keep it going and support the Obscure Nick brand, feel free to donate. The link's right there down in the description box below. All the good information's there and everything. Thank you guys for being here. So let's get started. So All That Season 3 was filmed from July 1996 to February 1997. This was a season where the filming location changed as well, not just cast members. This was our first cast member shift, but it was also our first location shift. And so they moved from Orlando, Florida to LA during this season. And it was filmed at Paramount Pictures Studio. And this was the only season filmed at Paramount Pictures Studio. So keep in mind, the child labor laws are a lot different. Actually, they're a lot more secure in LA than they are in Orlando. We can definitely do a separate videos on the labor laws for filming in Orlando versus LA and how the content is so much different. So, and I feel there is a more sense of security. There's a more sense of grounding with this season. Personally, it's not as loose, I would say. And it seems like it's more controlled overall. This season marks Angelique Bates is gone and is replaced by Amanda Bynes. And this was where Amanda Bynes got her start in her career. And she definitely leaves her mark on the show. And it's actually crazy. Like, I wonder what history would have been like if Angelique Bates stayed on the show, and would we have ever had Amanda Bynes? Would maybe Katrina Johnson would have got the Amanda show then, which there was talk about Katrina Johnson getting her own show called The Katrina Show. And she mentioned this in the Quiet on Set documentary, Katrina Johnson, that there were talks with her and Dan Schneider coming up with the Katrina Johnson show, which was going to also be a sketch comedy show, which I would have loved to see as well. Like, I feel Amanda Bynes is truly a gifted talent, but I also feel like Katrina Johnson's also a truly gifted talent, and I would have loved to see her thrive. After this, into the showbiz industry, she became to be more of a flight attendant and more in that world, which is great and everything. And I think she's thriving now, but I would have loved to see her in movies, on SNL, things of that nature. Because I truly believe she's one of the most underrated cast members for this show after watching this, because she was honestly the most enjoyable part that I've seen from all these 3 seasons in this retrospective, where I can laugh as an adult at lots of the jokes she's telling. And she has such great comedic timing as well. So, but I also get, like, Amanda Bynes has really great comedic timing too. So I see why Amanda Bynes got the show, essentially. I think a big part of Katrina Johnson's downfall, because again, I think they didn't like that she got older and she was going through puberty at this point. And you can see that she does look a lot older. So they needed someone younger. And I think they wanted to keep Katrina Johnson a little bit younger. They had an issue with her weight during the second season. Nickelodeon executives did, and they got a call to her house. And they said, can we do something about Katrina Johnson's weight? She's looking a little more on the heavier side. And which is so, like, ew. Like, it's just so ew for them to even say that. But this is very stereotypical Hollywood. Like, I've gotten criticized for my looks too by certain people who were producers and stuff. So it's just they're so about typecasting, and honestly, that was probably really damaging to her in the long run. But Katrina Johnson today seems to have a really good head. She's very beautiful, very, very lovely, very nice, to be honest with you. A lot of people told me she's very nice and still very funny. So that's really great to hear and everything. I'm glad that the Nickelodeon trauma of it all didn't affect her too deeply, it seems like. So, that's really good. But at 12 and 13 years old, being told you're too pudgy, that does do a lot of mental and psychological damage, I find, over time. But Katrina Johnson leaves mid-season and is replaced by Tricia Dickson. Tricia Dickson did a lot of voice acting afterwards in the anime world, and I believe she still does voice acting there. But in this show, she's only on one season. She's only in like half. She's not even like on the full season. She's just half the season. She just temporarily replaces. With Katrina Johnson, at this point, she was at an awkward phase, and I feel the show, since they had Amanda Bynes, who was the little girl, and Alisa Reyes was like the older girl, Katrina Johnson was like the middle child in the sense, became the middle child, it felt like, in a sense. And it felt like she never, her footing got lost in the casting of it all, I guess, in a sense. Even though she was still funny and she was still delivering, her placement in the cast, I feel like she felt like a misfit, essentially. And even with Tricia Dickson, the reason why Tricia Dickson Tricia Dickson was okay. She was decent, I think, at this. She did what she did with what she had to work with. But again, I feel they tried to replace Katrina with someone that looked like her. And it didn't really land the same because it was just so confusing because you had like Alisa Reyes there as well. So that's why after this season, they totally ditched someone who is blonde essentially. And this is what Tricia Dickson's one and only season, and she's never appeared or mentioned again in this show after this season. So let's get into the episodes now. Okay, so season 3 opens with Amanda Bynes. This is her first scene. She was 9 years old here, and this is where we meet Amanda. My first impressions is that everyone looks so much older and nobody mentions Angelique at all. So when they're told that they're going to get a new cast member, they're really hesitant about that until Amanda he propels the producer, Kevin, into the sky, and then they're like, welcome to the cast. So yeah, this is where Amanda's legacy starts. And then in this episode, we have Randy, which it's cooking with Randy, but it's no longer Mandy. And the excuse is that Mandy lost her mind and is in chocolate rehabilitation illness. And this is a common theme with Dan Schneider's shows. Whenever someone leaves, it always seems to be like they're getting rehabilitated. There's an illness. Like there's always something with making fun of mental illness, essentially, whenever someone leaves his shows. And it is really, like, it bothers me. It's really problematic behavior, in my opinion. And I feel like why do we have to be so dehumanizing and degrading and make fun of mental illnesses like that with people? They also did this with Nicole and Zoe 101. And I've noticed when it's not Dan Schneider's favorite people, they always leave with these unhinged excuses. So with Nicole and Alexa Nicholas, we all know that situation and how that panned out. Go look at my video of what really happened on Zoe 101 to get the full scoop on Alexa if you do not know that. But Angelique, if you look at the previous video of how Angelique left this show, essentially, with all that season 2 retrospective, you'll be all caught up with what happened with her, CPS, and Nickelodeon, and her mother. That's a whole situation in itself. But they were auditioning in this sketch for Randy to have a new co-host. So Alisa Reyes plays Sandy, and she, by the way, in this season, Alisa Reyes is in more skits this year, is what I've noticed, which is really great. This is Alisa Reyes' last season, but I think she really comes into her own in this season, in my opinion, even more so. And she has an amazing career afterwards. And then Tandy, which I know this is... There's stuff with this character. He's definitely on something. But Tandy, played by Josh Server, has always, like, I remember this episode specifically because of Tandy. And I remember the vegetables and such thing. And this was my favorite. This was like top 3 at least, or might have been my favorite skit as a kid, with the Tandy of it all in this. And it's just the way Josh Server plays this is so hilarious. Lori Beth Denberg's episode 1 Vital Informations about the Macarena, I found that really funny as well. And what's also noticeable in this first episode is they're making Katrina Johnson look younger with some of her outfits, trying to be cute. Like they're still trying to keep her youth. And I can tell that the producers did not expect her to grow up over the timeline from season 2 to season 3. So it's very interesting that they're trying to keep her younger. And I don't know, there's just something, there's a whole theory, adults trying to keep kids young, like adult directors, producers, etc., trying to keep them young by putting them in very youthful clothing. That is a thing I've just heard of before. We can dive into that further. And then there's also in episode 1, there are some things with Pierre Escargot. It's very, see, if Pierre Escargot was in SNL in like an adult sketch comedy, this stuff would be funny. But some of the stuff he says, like, don't put bacon fat on my toilet seat. I thought you said this pudding. Take those pork chops out of your brassiere, is very edgy for a kids show and very on brand with a Dan Schneider show. I also think sketch with the gifted children scared to turn on the lights on and off was hilarious. That was Amanda Bynes' first skit, and I think she did really well. And then we go into episode 2 where Alisa Reyes replaces Angelique as Penny Lane, which is interesting choice to me. I would think they would just make a whole new character instead of just directly replacing Angelique like that. But okay. But in the Super Dude skit, it's with Super Dude and Frozen Yo Girl, which was a good sketch. It was good until like they all licked Yo Girl, which was Kel and getting licked, which, as you know from Quiet at Set with Brian Hearns and the peanut butter licking the dog thing, my brain's going back to that. I'm sorry, I just have to mention that. That was my initial thought. In this episode 2, there's the repairman sketch, which is on the spaceship, which Keenan, I think Katrina was one of the more adult characters, and it's with Josh and Katrina, and it's very noticeable in this. And I think this sketch is really funny, and I think Repairman is one of the best characters in this show and one of Kel's best characters. What I found interesting is Amanda and the Penny Collection skit. This would be something that no longer exists because there's no more pennies, so that's interesting to me. And then they have the show and tell sketch where Josh is shirtless with chickenpox. Some producer always wanted him shirtless, which is something. But I think it's a funny sketch about chickenpox and how it spreads to everyone for show and tell. I thought that was clever. It's just like we didn't need the shirtless part necessarily. We could have just shown it on his skin and face. But that's just my opinion on it, just because it's kids television. Episode 3, the Good Burger sketch was good for kids with the fries and the nose and Ed fussing with the inspector. I thought that was really funny. Randy's still looking for a co-host, which is Andy by Amanda, who likes chocolate the most. And Andy got Randy catching some strays. Like, for real. He was struggling, then cleared her by pouring chocolate on his head. And this was just like comedy masterpiece with Keenan and Amanda. And Amanda already at a young age just like mastering her skill set. I felt, though, again, perfect. It was perfect there. And then always in these shows, it just gets taken to a place that didn't need to. Like, we didn't need the massage and the older woman rubbing him, which is very similar to something that Dan Schneider and his assistant would be giving him shoulder massages all the time. Very, very alarming. Then in episode 4, it's an Ishbu skit, which is very questionable, but everyone was calling him foreign. And how do we feel about the Ishbu skit and everyone calling him foreign in this day and age? Just saying. Look, I'm just waking it up a little bit. And then also in the skit was interesting because there's a Ren and Stimpy cameo appearance, which at this time, I think Ren and Stimpy was off air at this time. Like, it just ended. But because this would have been 1996. So this, the last episode of Ren and Stimpy aired in 1996. So this is right at the tail end of Ren and Stimpy, which was still a cultural 90s phenomenon at the time. And I'm noticing a pattern of Keenan being with older women, which is, again, why is this normalized? But you know what it is. And then in episode 4, we also have Kiki and Fran, the Eileen Girl skit, which is Elisa's most memorable skit, and I think she does it perfectly. And Katrina comes in as Dee Dee, and Kiki and Dee Dee, I felt was a good comedic duo. So I really like this with Alisa, Katrina, Lori Beth Denberg. Excellent, excellent. Again, Alisa's really comes into her own with this season, I feel. And then we go into episode 5 where Keenan and Josh play a joke on Kevin, which they made Kevin open a box of a fake rattlesnake. And personally, my biggest fear is snakes. Like, oh my God. And even like a fake snake would scare me. Like someone has thrown a fake snake on me and I lost it. Like I lost it. Yeah. And then Kevin gets in a big squat. Tyra Banks is in this episode. I feel like she was solid in this Good Burger skit. And I really like this, a very young Tyra Banks. And this was a Good Burger skit, which Josh plays an old man and Kel is fantasizing about marrying Tyra. So very, very of its times. And then Ask Ashley is like, this is the first time we see Ask Ashley. And she was like a stereotypical tantrum child. But Amanda played this so perfectly, so sweet, but can throw a tantrum. Just like there's like a good dichotomy of being the bratty child, but then also going back from sweet to innocent, and sweet, like very sweet, and then tantrum, sweet to tantrum. Like there's a very good balance of that, and she knows how to go from 0 to 100 in a way that feels very organic. So that, again, really great skit by Amanda. There's this sketch with Miss Fingerly sketch with a cowboy and the horse comes in. And again, if you've read Lori Beth speaking out about Dan Schneider, I can't help but correlate Lori being shown something inappropriate with a horse by Dan at his house. Mind you, Lori Beth was of age, but there definitely was an element of grooming that Lori Beth was describing here. And it was very gross and inappropriate for Dan Schneider to even show this horse thing. And it's so gross. But I can definitely link that article below just to give you guys some context to that. Just I'll let you guys read that further. But the cowboy was talking about loving Lisa's character, talking about wieners, and Miss Fingerly asked the cowboy to dance. And Josh plays the cowboy character well in this, I will say. And Keenan, Nasty Nancy, and Josh showing up. And this sketch also had an Indian portion, and Miss Fingerly, a white woman, mimics, which I don't know. This, again, cancel culture would totally cancel this. And then we have episode 6 where Kel moves to Japan. And Alisa asks Kel for a good burger before. And Amanda takes a sumo wrestler down in this. And then also in this episode, Ishbu, the woman saying he's foreign again, might not age well, and then him sitting in an adult's lap. Again, Ishbu has a lot. The Ishbu skits, I don't think would be made today, to be honest with you. And Ishbu makes the therapist rubs his shoulder like Dan Schneider. Again, another episode where it's Dan Schneider's fantasy of having an assistant rub his shoulders, which he did in real life, as we found out in Quiet on Set. And then Kiki and the Island Girls. Kiki annoys the Islanders who are trying to take Kiki and Fran hostage and kind of saves them and asks if they want to play Boulder, which made me laugh. And again, another perfect skit. I like that the skit's becoming more present. I actually really like the vital information in episode 6. Perfect. Lori Beth Denberg nailed it. And then also in this episode, it's the Lemonade Scammer, which this is the last one where Katrina plays her. And then Amanda comes in as the new girl taking her spot, which is the turning point in this show because this was Katrina's best character. The Lemonade Scammer was my personal favorite of Katrina. And even at this point, she was still solid in it, even though she was no longer a little girl. But, it was like, there was this moment with Amanda and Katrina where it's like passing the baton down. And I wonder if at this point in this skit, this is where Katrina was like, I'm going to quit this show. I'm going to leave. Because she did say in Quiet on Set she did quit. And I wonder if this was that moment. I don't know. But I believe from Quiet on Set, she said that it was a week she took to do this. It was like she quit 1 week and then she was gone a week later. So I don't know. And then we have episode 7 where Josh gets hit on the head and pretends to be a character from medieval times. And Amanda whacks him and then he starts quacking, which I found really funny. And then we have episode 7, which is the Maroons, which I don't know if they're supposed to be special needs, but it has that energy, or are they playing children is my question. But they are all dressed like babies, which is interesting. Adults dressing like babies. Again, that whole theme of producers dressing up older children in younger children clothes. That theme comes up again. And the Good Burger skit with Ed smashing the clown, which Keenan played the clown perfectly in it. And Kel drinks the helium, and you can see like the bungee cord, which is funny because he goes like he drinks the helium and then he floats up, but you can see the bungee cord. But on TV, you wouldn't see it as much, but in HD now you could definitely see the bungee cord, which has a kitschiness to it, in my opinion. And then we have episode 7, Bradley the baby in the Miss Fingerly class, which was played by Keenan well. Keenan played this character well. I found it really funny, but Katrina takes Bradley's weasel and chucks it. And this was actually one of my favorite skits from the whole, but one of the funniest skits. I wouldn't say my favorite, but definitely one of the ones I got, like, I was dying laughing. Except then, again, it takes it to a place where it's this adult on child thing, where it's like the baby sitting on Miss Fingerly's lap. Again, you guys know, I know. It was good, it was perfect, and then they had to add that, and I'm just like, we did not need that. Episode 8, Josh has the hiccups, and Alisa tries to fish slap him to get rid of the hiccups, and it doesn't hit him fully, as you can see, but you get the point. It's very slapstick comedy. And then Keenan puts food and ice down his pants, and he feels weird. Again, Dan Schneider, a lot of things going down the pants. Not other kids shows have this, but somehow this kids show has it. And then we have the Okra sketch, which Kel Mitchell does Oprah's mannerisms hands down. This is such a hilarious skit. And Katrina plays this gangster character where is an older character and no longer, again, she's playing more older characters in this season, and takes Okra down and launches her in a chair. And then Katrina playing the geek club leader teacher, which in this episode, and Alisa saying all that side stuff is so funny. Again, Alisa really comes into her own this season. Everyone did well in this skit. I love that it's the opposite of stereotypes. That's what I love most about this skit, and I found that very clever. I do see that the producers like Dan Schneider and Brian Robbins were trying to find a way to fit Katrina into this cast somehow still at this particular point. And then episode 9, Katrina has a time machine, and I love an episode where it's Katrina focused, and she also had bangs, which I loved her 90s style. I couldn't get my eyes off that. Loved it. It was very 90s, very of the time. And then we have Cooking with Randy and Chris Farley, which is ketchup versus chocolate. And something that was like, I don't think we should be saying kids shows. You have aroused the chocolate gods, which I was like, Jesus, like that would not be, how did that even get passed? Episode 9, Coach Creedon goes on a blind date, and Kel does amazing physical comedy with this. And if I was Barbara, though, I would be so terrified, because this would be like meeting a catfish on Tinder with no profile. And for me, I need to see the person first. Like, I couldn't. Let me ask you guys in the audience, in this day and age, would you actually go on a blind date? Because Like, I don't know how I feel about that. In this episode, also, the squash costume's missing, and Josh and Katrina interact with the audience by throwing tomatoes, and they throw it at a ninja. And Kevin was funny with the physical comedy in this, I found. So that was really good. Episode 10, what stood out to me was the Ross Perot and Earboy skit. I think this is one of the last times we see Ross Perot. And this is one of my favorite skits, again, from the whole series. I love how it's always the same plot, and Ross gives Earboy some new way to try to fit in. And it was Kung Pao Weenie. Anyone thinking this, though, would be like, this is a sausage fest. Ross Perot saves the day and takes out Earboy and Pizza Face's bullies once again. So love those skits. Always a fun one. And then we also have an Okra skit, which there was the kids trying to wave to the camera. Alisa played a stretchy superhero again. Again, another showing more Alisa in this. Love to see that. And then there was Super Dude with Milkman and Lori playing Sweaty Woman and Katrina using window wiper to clean Super Dude. Interesting skit. And then if there was an innuendo, not going to say the innuendo. I'm going to just move on to the next skit. Josh who plays Harvey Baxter, has a spazzy hand. This sketch is funny, and I think Josh is really good at physical comedy. He actually, like, to me, gives like a younger John Ritter in this. So I really love that, and I wish this was more of a recurring skit. But also in episode 10, I loved the 1/112 performance. Was one of my favorite of all time, The Only You. And they were singing live, and Only You is one of my favorite songs of all time, by the way. All that's or early seasons with the R&B representation was so phenomenal. And I have to say that's why this show became number one. And I noticed, though, Katrina wasn't in the ending of this performance, so she began getting cut out of the show. And then we move on to episode 11. Keenan is feeling weird because his feet is being licked by puppies. Again, reminds me of the peanut butter, Brian Hearns and the peanut butter from Quiet on Set, just saying. I don't like saying the words of what that represents because it's just inhumane. We shouldn't be like even doing this, to be honest with you, on TV. But episode 11 is the Good Burger, and Keenan wants a meat patty. And again, nailed this one. Another solid Good Burger skit with Lori, Beth, Keenan, and Josh. And then Kiki and Friend gets aliens invade, and Kiki is willing to be taken by the aliens. And love this idea of aliens coming to the island. It definitely feels like I feel like Fran would be like, this is a fever dream. These are not real aliens. They eventually do get, in this skit, they do get transferred to the moon. Another creative concept for Kiki and Fran, the island girls. Love that. Pierre Escargot. Why must you beat me with a pork chop? Thank you for deep frying my pants. Kids won't see that, but adults will see that, is all I'm going to say. Again, another episode where Katrina was not included with the musical guest at the end. And then we move on to episode 12, where Josh and Keenan ram Amanda to the door to unlock it as the opening. And they do the Star Trek skit again, which, by the way, in the stars, whoever did costume for the Star Trek skit with Captain Tantrum, they did an excellent job with representing Star Trek uniforms with whoever the costume designer is. So shout out to the costume designer. You did 100 on this. This alien was so fruity, and the comedian that played it was on point. And this was also around the time Space Cases was on Nickelodeon. So it was all very fitting. And I think Space Cases was on SNICK, which is the Saturday Night Nick block. So it all makes sense why like these all came together. And Space Cases we could do a deep dive on Space Cases because I think Space Cases is an underrated Nickelodeon show. And then we have another Earboy and Pizza Face sketch, which Alisa and Amanda play the popular girls,
which is funny, but it's also funny because like Amanda's so much younger than Alisa. So it's like, it looks like more like younger sister and older sister. And Alisa plays those types of characters like as the popular girls really well. So her casting and her placement in this cast makes total sense. Also, then this is a Ross Perot skit where there's a hot tub of money and 4 billion jacuzzi dollars. So I love that. And Earboy and Pizza Face start a band and they end up singing. And I think this might be the last Earboy and Pizza Face skit. We'll see about that. I keep saying that, but we'll see about that. And then Pierre Escargot is perfectly played by Keenan. It's the flippers, the feet and stuff that bothers me a little bit just because of what we know of Dan Schneider and his feet stuff, his feet content, I should say. But Keenan nails the whole thing perfectly, and I will always give him credit for that. And then in this episode, we have a skit called Dentist Bynes, which is a parody of Amanda Bynes' father, which already showed that like the producers were really invested in Amanda at this point, and they saw her as a star. And this was mid-season 3. And this already, I have mixed feelings about Amanda's father from what I've heard from Amanda herself and what's been put out there, but that's a different topic for a different video. But Josh plays Dentist Bynes and Alisa's playing the patient. And then Alisa and Josh go at the audience for playing with toys in the audience, which is really funny skit overall. And then in this episode, Mona Lisa is guest and Katrina is not included yet again. So this, I wonder with these guest appearances, if it was filmed after Katrina's departure is my question. Or yeah, that's what that's what I'm assuming. Then in episode 13, it opens with Kel's birthday and everyone is included. They got Kel as an old lady, which I don't, again, adult on teenager. That's showing, a lot of those themes are showing up again, of them being intimate, just saying. And then in this episode, Josh plays a guy named Chip and Alisa go on a date until he checks out a girl. So Chip has wandering eyes, and Repairman breaks into this Italian restaurant, and Repairman ends up kissing Chip. And this was a really wild skit, and it's interesting to see a man-on-man kissing in this, because especially because this was the mid-90s. So I wonder how people felt about this then in some way, because the homophobia in the 90s was for real. It's still real today, but here you couldn't even see this stuff on TV. So it was a different time of this being shown. So that's actually quite progressive, I would say. And then this episode, this still had the loud librarian. Alisa chokes and the loud librarian kicks her out. And this was really funny. One of the best things from the loud librarian, she said, "This is a library, not a chokatorium." And then she does the Macarena. So it's all over the place. Like the loud librarian feels like a true fever dream. And this is one of those skits where it feels like a true fever dream. Like she lets someone choke and then kick them out for choking. And then she does the Macarena. So funny. This last skit is the sticky store, which Keenan owns a sticky store where everything's sticky. And this is like the final skit where Katrina's like the main character. She does appear a few times afterwards, but this is like her final skit, which is sad. And Katrina tries to look for non-sticky items. And then Kel comes in to rob the sticky store, and then he gets stuck, which is the irony of that all. Trying to rob a sticky store, and then you get stuck in the sticky store as you're trying to rob it. Really well done skit. Katrina was included this time at the end of the episode, but this is pretty much the end of the Katrina Johnson era. After this point, she just appears like once or twice in just like for just like one skit or something. But this is like technically the official end. However, this is where it gets a little messy with the season and it gets a little disjointed in a sense. because the next episode has Tricia Dickson, which there's a few different entrances with Tricia Dickson, which is very confusing on the way they aired it. So this first episode with Tricia Dickson airs, and it's with Alisa, and Kel tells everyone to get in a box for the opening, which is very Dan Schneider's, all I'll say. But Amanda ends up carrying the box, which is funny because Amanda's so small and she's carrying all these heavy, heavy people. But, you know, of course she wasn't actually carrying people. It's just, you know, TV magic, as I would say. Okay, this Good Burger skit in this episode almost got me sick because of Edge using the Good Burger. It is so gross, and I don't even want to show it. I do not want to even show it. Like, there's just something about it that just makes me want to gag. Dan Schneider as Mr. Bailey, though, in the skit had a bigger role, I will say. Tries to convince Ed to take the day off because there's a food critic coming. And the food critic is played by George Jefferson, which is Sherman Hensley. So when he was still alive, so amazing all-star cameo. Again, this is why All That was the #1 show on Nickelodeon at this time, because they got cameos like this. The puppy in this food critic skit made me a little bit worried because of what Lori Beth, what she said about Dan Schneider with the animal allegations. Again, I don't want to say it out loud, very triggering. And then we have Tricia Dickson's first actual sketch, which she's playing a teenage girl with a Valley accent dating Bradley the baby, set up by Josh and Alisa. And the situations with the teen girl making out, kissing a baby seems inappropriate, the idea of it. And some of the things Bradley says is just like funny noise and you get all wet. Again, baby saying that can be taken many different ways. Is all I'm gonna say. Tricia Dickson did good in this, I think, personally. I will say, as Bradley the baby, always funny. And then Ask Ashley in this skit was with Ask Ashley, and Dr. Joyce Brothers joins in, and I actually thought this was Ashley's mother at first, but this was really funny, and it was interesting, how Dr. Joyce Brothers was an actual psychologist. And it makes sense why she would fit in the skit. It was just interesting, the diversity of talent they brought onto this show, not just from R&B artists that were just up and coming or known or had, but also having people like Tyra Banks, supermodel, Dr. Joyce Brothers, a psychologist, George Jefferson. I feel All That really had a diverse amount of guests, which was really interesting because I don't know if we would see that as much today in modern day kids shows, but I just found that really interesting. And then we move on to episode 15, which is an Okra doing a sketch with a love match, and Miss Fingerly is chosen as the contestant. I laughed so damn hard when the construction worker Lester Oaks knocked off Kel's wigs in this. And Keenan played it perfectly. Kel and Josh and Lori all showcase how they are the strongest performers in this show, because then Tandy shows up, and I love this character for Josh. It was one of my favorite. This sketch was very risque, I will say. And Tandy also gives Miss Fingerly the finger. I had to rewind it because I'm did Tandy just give Miss Fingerly the finger? I literally had to rewind that. But overall, very funny, well-written skit. There is some risque parts, but it was good for what it was. And then we're now back to the Star Trek skit, as I like to call it, with Captain Tantrum. And this was a solid skit. I think it was the Starship versus Pignoids Weinstein, played by Tricia. And I thought whoever wrote the skit deserves credit. And when they send the missile and the Pignoid ship turns into bacon, that was so funny. It was very funny. And it was a very kid-friendly sketch, I will say. But it was still funny. See, this type of content, and I think this season they mastered it, where they did have a lot of kid-friendly skits. There were some skits that went overboard, where they had to put in innuendos, but they didn't need the innuendos to be funny. And I think this was the perfect example of that. And I overall thought this was a really well-written skit. This Ask Ashley skit, again, another well-written skit. Whoever wrote this episode made it very kid-friendly, and I thought this might be one of my favorite episodes from this season. And I love the Monica performance, especially when I was watching all these episodes and I was watching these at night. These 90s R&B artists have such a nocturnal feel, where also the setup they did like was so just nocturnal. It was so euphoric. It was very spiritual. And it felt like summer at night by the lake or something, and just laying back and watching the stars. And they captured the atmospheric part of these performances, like lighting design and everything. Really got to give them credit for that. They did an excellent job on that. Episode 16 is Keenan's hair opening. Like, my notes for this was like, Keenan looks like Marge Simpson. He looks like Marge Simpson. So I love that. I love that. That was like, if there was live action Marge Simpson, this is the skit you go to. Josh gets this, like, there's this Good Burger skit where Josh gets his big burger, which is too big to eat, which I honestly think a lot of restaurants have burgers these size these days, but back then they didn't make the burgers as big these days. Like they like triple stack, super stack, like double Big Mac, triple Big Mac, you know what I mean? So that today this would be considered a normal size, but also to me that's like a walk-in heart attack. I could never eat a burger this size, but I eat chicken burgers. I don't eat red meat personally, just a preference. And then we have the complaint department skit, which my notes from this, all I could think of was Lori Beth Denberg has a Delight wig. Delight with groove is in the heart, groove is in the heart. That singer, that's what that reminds me of. And I wonder if that was the inspiration for the skit. And then Katrina still appears in the show. I think this might be her last skit, if I'm not mistaken. But she appears with Coach Creedon, and Coach Creedon says something very alarming. But Katrina is credited as former All That cast member in this skit, is something to note. Cast member. So I'm assuming the sketch was filmed prior to her quitting. And then also in this episode, I love the Aaliyah performance. Again, very R&B underground feel that All That had during this time. And I really love the representation of color that they had on the show and the diversity they had, like during this era with All That, Keenan and Kel, My Brother and Me, Cousin Skeeter, Journey of Alan Strange. But All That does become a little more white in later seasons. But here they're very much in their R&B era, which I love. And that was very prominent music of the mid-90s at this point. And then we go into episode 17, which this is very confusing again, because Tricia Dickson is like introduced, and like this is her official introduction, even though she was in episodes that already aired prior to this. But this must have been the first filmed episode she did. And they all test her by boxing Kevin. And again, Kevin always gets punishments. Like they did the same thing with Amanda Bynes. And then she levitates Josh. Tricia levitates Josh in this, which I found pretty cool. So that was really cool. And then in this episode, and the standout skit to me is the Miss Piddlin, which is the lunch lady who can't take her food being criticized. Genius concept, but there's too much about talking about peas. But I will say Keenan played this character very well. And then episode 18, there's the sketch called You Can Win, which the only thing I can think of with this skit is that Josh's hair, I'm questioning if this was real or if this was a wig. Like, I have to give it to the hairstylist, whoever did his hair like this. Like, was this his real hair or was this a wig? And that was stuck on my mind this whole time. That was my biggest question from the skit. But I will say this feels like a kid's skit where it's a game show. It's called You Can Win, but you really can't. But easy concept for kids to grasp, perfect for this show. Honestly, Keenan can do any character too. He did excellent job in this. This episode had a lot of audience reactions, interaction with Keenan and Kel playing Mavis and Clavis, and they all have this energy of just there's a lot of audience interaction energy. Okay, again, another favorite musical guest memorable performance that I remembered was MC Light Cold Rock Party. This is one of my favorite performances from the show. One of the most remembered, again, like the 112 performance. Those two I remember the most. I listen to those two songs to this day. I listen to Cold Rock Party in the summer all the time. It's the perfect summer anthem, and you can listen to it at any given time. Love this skit. Love what they did here. Perfect skit. Perfect way to end the episode. One of my favorite songs of all time. Wasn't too much in episode 19 that stood out to me, but episode 20, this is like one of the last, this is technically like the season final with last normal episode, I would say. But it's a Super Dude sketch where Amanda imposters Super Dude and people have to figure out who the real Super Dude is. But Amanda's really the villain of Super Dude and tries to rob the bank. And instead of Milkman being in this, it was Amanda being an imposter of Super Dude, which I found really funny. And then the Maroon family comes back and they're on a game show, and it seems like they're reworking old sketches from previous episodes. And the other family is the Kopelman family, which is Kevin's last name, the stage manager. And Tricia is in this side of the family, so she plays one of like the good kids, and then there's the Maroons. So it was very interesting, funny skit. Pierre Escargot, the standout thing with this was, could you fill my bathtub with possum fat? Again, that's very Dan Schneider, very Pierre Escargot. And then Miss Fingerly in this skit, this was a really funny skit with Miss Fingerly. She gets all her teeth pulled and the kids take advantage of it. And it just piles on. But like that's like technically the last skit from the season. And then we have the music special, which is kind of like a bonus episode, which is hosted in the green room with Mavis and Clavis. And Katrina Johnson is in this episode, by the way, so this must have been filmed before. And they watch past performances of all that on TV, and it's pretty much just a clip show episode. This must be something Dan Schneider wrote because Mavis tells Katrina to rub his feet. But yeah, it's just a clip show episode with past performances, and it's chill, easy, but it's a clip show, so there's not too much there, but nice. But that's how the season ends of this season of All That. And there we have it. We're done. All That season 3. Overall, I think this was the peak point for All That, in my opinion. We'll see when we get to season 4 or 5, but personally for me, I remember this season as a kid where I was like, this is my favorite season of All That. This might be my favorite because it has Amanda, it has Katrina, and I personally enjoyed it. So this season of All That averaged 2 million viewers regularly and has gone up from the previous year, which was more between 1 and 2 million, but it was just starting to peak into 2 million. However, for the majority of the season, it was in the 2 million range the entire time. And after the season, this had several cast changes. As you know, we already spoke about it earlier that Katrina Johnson exits and quits mid-season. And she does return at certain points in the series, as we'll discuss going further. But after this, she just doesn't do acting for a while. She goes through high school, then goes to college. And, you know, she was such an iconic portion and such a important part of the early seasons of All That, in my opinion. Her best sketches were The Lemonade Scammer, The Club Bouncer, Roseanne, and Ross Perot. Then we have Alisa Reyes, who exits and leaves and goes to a sitcom called One World on NBC, which lasted for 3 seasons. And then later she's on Disney Channel's animated series, The Proud Family, and she's currently on the Proud Family's reboot, Louder and Prouder, which is on Disney+. I think Alisa's exit was her own choice. I think she got this offer and then she left the show. There's not too much on that, but that is what I've gathered from the information I found on Alisa Reyes' exit, which I think really propelled her into a pretty decent career, because even today she's still working and she's working on Disney Channel. So those Disney Channel checks are even more stronger than Nickelodeon checks, as we know. So, because Nickelodeon doesn't give that residual money, but Disney Channel sure will. Alisa Reyes will be known for the Island Girls. I think she really peaked in this season, and she just got better and better. So I think this was the perfect time for her to take on something that was different and to elevate to the next level. And it's really wonderful that she was able to get a sitcom on NBC that lasted 3 seasons. So I'm very, very proud of her. Love her. She's wonderful. Then we have Tricia Dickson, the third exit. And I don't know if she was fired. There's not a lot of information on Tricia Dickson and how she got on all that and how she left all that. But she was just a featured player in this season. But she did not come back for season 4. And I'm assuming she was fired. She was an okay at this. Like she did good for what she was given and stuff. With time and expansion, I could have seen her be more prominent in the show. She goes on to guest star on Even Stevens, Rave, a TV film, and now she does voice acting in multiple animes.
Hello guys, I am using my new wireless mic, so this is kind of a test that I'll be using for a live stream. But as I was researching and editing, I realized something that I forgot to mention is Tricia Dickson actually goes by not just Tricia Dickson, but also by another name called Samantha Tebek. And what I looked at is that she's credited as Samantha Tebek in these animes, which was really interesting. So, and she also says on her IMDb, she only occasionally acts and has since expanded her interests working as an executive director of compliance and licensing at Odyssey Insights, a cannabis company. She was previously president for Greenwise Consulting, a cannabis industry in Los Angeles, and the director of Eden Enterprises, a manufacturing company in Oakland, California. Very interesting. So Tricia Dickson has had a variety of careers, but I thought I would just bring this up just as some background information to just understand Tricia Dickson further.
But her best sketch that I got from the season is her on the spaceship sketch as the Swinestein villain. So she did really well on that. This is the only season filmed at Paramount Studios, as I said before, and the next era of all that is filmed somewhere else and has major cast changes, and a lot of new people are added in. And some might argue this is a very new era of all that, in a way, that season 4 becomes. And some people even claim it's the peak of all that in a lot of ways. I personally think season 3 is the peak, but I haven't seen season 4 in forever. So when we go back and rewatch this, I'll keep that in mind as we go, and I'll give you my input on whether I think that's the peak or if I think season 3 is the peak. But we'll just have to see what happens. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. Feel free to leave a donation to my PayPal. And we'll talk again soon. And I'll see you in season 4 of all that. Bye.